heard people say about, almost dismissing England as because of the draw they've had in the last couple of years. You've got to beat what's in front of you.
It seems like the debate in Brazil at the moment is they have all this sort of attacking talent, but how attacking are they going to be?
If you know anything about professional footballers, they're driven and selfish, and it won't bother Bruno Fernandes in the slightest what he thought about what Cristiano did to Manchester United if he can deliver for Portugal. Hello and welcome to the Indo World Cup, coming live from our brand new studios in Dublin. I'm Aidan O'Hara, and every game day morning throughout the tournament in Qatar, we'll be bringing you the latest news, reaction and previews to what's sure to be a World Cup like no other. Today, for one day only, I'm joined by Daniel McDonnell, Irish Independent soccer correspondent, in studio before he jets off to the desert. How are you, Dan?
I'm good, yeah. It's nice to be in the studio, but yeah, we'll be talking remotely for the rest of this experiment.
Yes, absolutely. Like, you're going to be on the ground in Qatar. Obviously, it's coming along quick with mid-season and all that. It's really coming everybody fast. What are you expecting when you get over there?
I'm not entirely sure, to be honest. You can see, like, from the people who've arrived very early, you can get a sense of what the atmosphere is like on the ground. Like, is it real? Is it manufactured? Is it sort of that's not that's not exactly out of sync with some previous World Cups I've attended. I mean, this is the fourth World Cup I've gone to. South Africa and Russia in particular probably would have had cosmetic elements to it in various ways, in different ways. Probably Russia more pronounced. Brazil a little bit different, a little bit more authentic. But this one, it's very hard to know. I mean, it's well documented, the issues with the country. We will cover these all in due course. Absolutely. And it's very hard to summarise it into one sort of neat window. But I think everyone is aware broadly why this hosting is so controversial. You're going to a country with no history of hosting this volume of travellers, even if the volume of travellers may be smaller than previous World Cups. It's a Winter World Cup. There are stadiums that have all been put up. We don't know what the sort of demographic of fans in the stadium will be. So there's a huge unknown, and I think from speaking to anyone I know that's travelling out there, everyone sort of feels the same. There's no sense of knowing what's coming. It's more a sense of what way is this going to go. Yeah,
I think the word authentic there is a very, very good word. I mean, everything about World Cups is about history, where you look back into, depending on what age you are, everyone has a first World Cup they remember, but they know about World Cups before they were born. They know about Jules Fontaine. They know about things that happened, 1966, all that. I think that element of lack of authenticity about the whole bid, going back from when it was given to now, even with the building of stadiums and that kind of thing, where it's really, really difficult to know how to feel about it. It's just
completely conflicted. I think there's no other way to describe it, and I think you're always very much conscious of it's like virtue signaling or something to be all overly performative around that and talk about how terrible it is while you're going. Like you have to be very conscious of probably striking the balance in the sense that this is the biggest sporting event in my view in the world. Each one has a story. Like every tournament has a story to tell, and often, but not always, but often it's wrapped in with the history of the country. Like Italia 90 in its own way is wrapped in with Italy. Yeah,
Nessun Dorma and all that. All that stuff.
Qatar, it's that. There's no charm. There's no charming anthem here. But this is the story of the tournament, and possibly it's going to be even more pronounced version of that. And I think there is that sense of knowing going there that this competition is never just going to be about the football. And again, previously South Africa, there was the huge symbolism of it being in Africa. Brazil, there was concerns about the finances being spent on stadiums in a country with huge poverty. Russia, probably the one I would in a way would almost have regrets about, because in the sense that I think a lot of people probably did take their eye off the ball a bit.
There was a consistent outrage about Qatar almost since it was announced. But the Russian, when you think back on it, there wasn't a huge amount, this kind of element of sports washing conversation pre-Russia, I wouldn't have thought, looking back.
No, but the voices were there. But I think the reason why Russia got away with it a bit more is that it does have a football tradition.
Yes.
And maybe in my own head, I had a good time in Russia, and now it's almost embarrassing to say it, because you do feel a little bit of guilt for almost saying that, but you go to sort of places like Kazan, Samara, all of which have sort of top level clubs there, and passionate football fans who were like, this is great, we love our football and it's coming here. And there would have been people, and I would have written about it at the time, every second person would be, oh, what do you think of Putin, what do you think of us? And you would have met people who were, they weren't brainwashed, but
absolutely.
There wasn't that sense that everything we do from this tournament has to be about this.
Yeah.
Whereas I feel with Qatar, there's a huge element of it's been so manufactured in a place with no infrastructure of any degree in terms of football, that you have to accept that all of this is being played in an illusion. It's like some kind of fantasy land that's been created. It's like a theme park. It's a football theme park that exists for a month, and as a result, you can't just suspend your knowledge of that and just completely consume yourself in the football. I think it's going to be difficult, in my opinion anyway. Everyone's different. I think it's going to be difficult to do that.
Yeah, I think like the fact that it's in winter as well, adds to the illusion of this. And as you said, we will come back to some of the issues, to put it mildly, that's been going on around the World Cup. Do you think though that like the fact that it is mid-season, going into more on-pitch activities, if you like, the fact that it's mid-season, is it something that like looking through the teams, there's a lot of teams with settled coaches, with settled styles of play that, they may not have had the preparation that you ordinarily would have leading into a World Cup, that 2-3 weeks to get a few friendlies in and all that. But is that something that is not probably that important because everyone's coming off from the same boat?
Yeah, I mean this is, I suppose, like it's the great unknown with this tournament. There will be people of the opinion. There will be sort of people who would have a view you would respect their opinion, who think this could actually, and again, there's almost an element of guilt in saying it, that it has the potential to be a very good World Cup.
Yeah.
Because you're not dealing with that end of season fatigue where you have players who by the end of the tournament are in their 11th month of the season and running on empty. Now we've seen in the build up to the competition, 1-2 week injuries become very significant, and some teams are going to be without big players, or going to have a diminished version of big players, and that is very much true. But the only thing I would say though, like there is a sense that yes, players won't be at the end of their tether, and they might be able to operate at a slightly higher intensity because of the time of year it is. They haven't got the same physical load they would have had on them in the summer, but we are still going to a place where it is the summer, and it's a particularly warm climate, and as a result, even some of the games that are being played at 10 o'clock at night local time are going to be played in sort of 25 degree temperatures. So when you consider, what you might find is that teams might start in that good place, they're not struggling, but the impact of a very tight calendar recently you might find more muscle and short-term injuries that people accrue them along the way.
Yeah, I mean Sadio Mane is obviously the big one that's probably been the biggest talking point really leading into it. I think players, whether by accident or design, have kind of got away with it relatively lightly. There hasn't been a huge, someone hurts their hamstring and they're gone. I mean, obviously Pogba's out, Kante's out. There have been people all the way along. That's always been the case in World Cups, that people miss out, unfortunately, through injury. I think, like, when you look at Group A, like Sadio Mane's fitness is the big asterisk to Senegal's hopes. With Netherlands, Senegal, Ecuador and Qatar. Netherlands obviously would be in Ireland's group in the next campaign. How do you see, are Netherlands the clear favourites, clear and obvious favourites for that?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the Mane factor is significant for Senegal. I mean, with the hosts, I have to get into the habit of it's Qatar. It's Qatar. I've been calling it Qatar all the time.
Yeah,
it's Qatar.
Yes.
They've had the best preparation of anyone because they have been in camp for a long period of time. They've been able, surprisingly enough, as a dictatorship, to manage their preparations carefully, and we'll probably deal with them a little bit more tomorrow. But in terms of the group overall, Holland are very solid. They don't have great goal scoring ability in their side. I mean, Memphis is a very important player. People who see the world through the Premier League will recoil at that.
Absolutely.
But he's very important for them. Senegal, solid team, like in the African Cup of Nations, took them a little while to warm up, and they have good players. I mean, they've got Mendy, they've got Koulibaly. It's not just a one-man operation, and they didn't concede a huge amount of goals in that, but Mane is a big factor.
He is.
I think the way it's set up, like, there should be no excuse for Holland for not to get off to a fast start, really.
No.
And they should be okay. But a lot of people seem to rate Ecuador. They think that they're a young side that's going to be very good in a couple of years' time. Listening to sort of some of the South American experts, they're saying just not to rule them out from being decent. And again, I know it's very... I mean, your cultural stereotypes, but I suppose the conditions, the climate won't bother them, and they're a young team, so they'll play with a bit of energy.
I think that, like, that energy aspect of it as well. Obviously, football has changed an awful lot in terms of you hear lots of stuff of pressing and counter pressing and high energy and all that. But with the tournament being, I mean, if you're lucky, you might get a game that's 25 degrees. So it's going to be very, very difficult to kind of keep that huge kind of intensity up in such a short window with the games. We'll move on to Group B now, which is England. Is it coming home? Is it not? England, USA, Wales and Iran. I think, just looking through, if you are taking boxes for England, you have, they did well in the last World Cup. They're finalists in the Euros. They've got a group of players, experienced players, and some ones coming through like Foden, Mount, Saka. They would seem to tick every box in terms of what you'd be looking for in a World Cup winner. But as you said earlier on, seeing things through the eyes of the Premier League, they also have Harry Maguire. There's an element of has Southgate run his race. Is this one of these tournaments that they're going to have expectations going in and then fall flat on their face again?
Yeah, England are a tough one to call, and we'll probably, with France as well, how much does form matter? These Nations League struggles this year, is that indicative of a decline of a manager who's lost his grip, or is it more a case of this isn't that important to us? Everything this year is about December, and we are building towards it. Now, the only thing is, they've conceded a high volume of goals in games, and it does appear to be, from the outset, more of the former, in the sense of maybe they've lost their way a bit. But you are right. They have a great squad. Yeah. For years, we would, you might have scoffed a little bit at times of English expectations. I don't think they're misplaced in terms of with the group they have. They've got their act together in terms of their academy at the Premier League level, and they're now producing genuine world-class players, such as Phil Foden, who's sort of potentially a generational talent for England. The question is, how different is it to play for England than it is to play for Man City? And that's, Southgate is quite rigid in his approach. He clearly believes that there's a way to navigate a tournament, which has worked for him to a point. But is that way, there's always that danger. It's like sort of Martin O'Neill's third tenure with Ireland or something, or third campaign with Ireland, that when you get to the end, the players just not a reflection of what went before, but they just crave something different.
Yeah, I think around the England expectations, I think where they're going to struggle in terms of getting to those expectations is the fact that they're two different teams. They've got a group of attackers that any team in this tournament would like to have. They've Harry Kane, proven goal scorer. They've got Saka, Grealish, Foden, Mount, Maddison, Grealish behind them. And then at the other end, they've got Harry Maguire, Eric Dyer, Pickford is prone to mistakes, Ramsdale is prone to mistakes. And I think that's why, for all England's attacking talent, I think that's why Southgate is going to be so rigid, because he knows he has to protect Harry Maguire. He knows he has to protect Eric Dyer. So that means
Rice and Bellingham, basically.
So that means Rice and Bellingham or Rice and Phillips. So you basically have a team where, Trippier might get forward, or Luke Shaw might get forward, but you're going to have 6 players whose job it is not to concede, and four players whose job it is to win the game, I think. And how far that can take them, it's difficult. Look, I expect them a bit like Netherlands. I can't see, unless you can, USA, Wales, Iran, I can't see them being,
it's a tricky little group, though. I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that they advance. Wales, there's a sense they're a little bit on the decline. It's still a little bit of a derby element. There's still something. That is the third game, though. Yeah. So that's the only thing. Iran, you got Carlos Queiroz there.
They'll set up in the first game against England to be absolutely 10 men behind
playing
the ball.
the greatest hits, but you've got a wily old coach there. So whatever you might think about that. And USA are okay, and they're probably building towards hosting the tournament in 4 years' time themselves. But you see there's sort of a sprinkling of young American talent that's starting to pop up in the Premier League and some of the better leagues, and they're okay. So when you look at the competition, like there's some nice sort of competitive groups here, and I think this is one that has the potential to be reasonably close. I fancy England to go through, but I'm just not sort of declaring it as a complete done deal.
Before we go on to Group C, who do you see going through with them?
Yeah, I just wonder. Could the US get through? I just wonder, do they have the capability to creep through?
They look like a team. I think probably have a little bit more class than Wales, as you said. Wales a bit on the other side of their best. And speaking of teams on the other side of their best, Argentina, Messi in Group C. Obviously, Messi's current form is still exceptional. It's just not quite what it was. They're in the group now with Mexico, Poland, the Saudis, Saudi Arabia. You're looking at Argentina, Mexico. It's a strange. Obviously, Poland have Lewandowski, who's a probably past his prime as well. It's almost the phrase you used earlier on, the greatest hits, where when Argentina and Poland are very much relying on a couple of players who are 3 or 4 years past their absolute peak.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, Argentina they're on this mad 35 game unbeaten run, and they've won Copa America. Messi seems to suddenly be very happy playing for Argentina. They suddenly seem to have they're missing Lo Celso, and like there's a couple of teams in this group that are missing a few players. I think Mexico are down 1 or 2 players that would be big players for them, and Raul Jimenez would be very important, but hasn't been 100%. But I think this is one actually where it's pretty clear, I think, who will win this group. I think it will be Argentina. I'd have no doubts about that. And they have the potential to go reasonably deep into this competition. I mean, that's stating the obvious. The one thing is, I mean, like they hammered Italy in the final. What was that competition called? The Finalissimo or something like that, which is the sort of a Super Cup effort for countries,
I struggle beyond the Euros and World Cups and Copa Americas. Beyond that, international competitions.
Yeah, well, they hammered them. But like, this is the thing, because of COVID, and this is the thing about Argentina and Brazil in this tournament, they haven't played very many European teams in the last couple of years. So the form guide, like Argentina's 35 game unbeaten run sounds terrific, and it is, but there's not many games against European sides in there, but they did destroy Italy in that context. So there's a little bit of an unknown over how they fare, because in 2018 Argentina went out in that mad game to France. I was lucky enough to be at that game, but in that competition they were struggling. They sort of crept through, whereas now they're realistic candidates for second place. I think this is possibly one of the weaker groups. I don't have a particularly strong opinion. It might well be Lewandowski can get Poland across the line, but again, that seems like a very predictable prediction.
Yeah, I wonder with Raul Jimenez whether he's one of these players that with respect to them, a middling club. The World Cup is by far the biggest thing in his career at the moment. Whether he's been kind of holding himself back a little bit, he had a very, very bad injury with Wolves, so they're very much reliant on him. In much the same, it's going to come down probably to Jimenez v Lewandowski, whoever comes out on top in that game to get through. In the Group D, we've got the holders, France. Obviously, no Pogba, no Kante, but a huge amount of talent still there. Denmark are in there, Australia, Tunisia. Denmark's Euros, obviously the last time was overshadowed. They were talked about as a dark horse for the last Euros, and obviously then Christian Eriksen incident happened, and they recovered from that, and obviously he recovered from that as well, and he's still there. It's a remarkable story. This again would seem to be a group divided in half. France and Denmark look to be the two strong teams, with Australia and Tunisia hoping to cause a shock. It's really difficult to see beyond the two.
Australia don't have a great crop at the moment. I think they only have a handful of players in like the big 5 leagues. I mean, I suppose you might think back to like Harry Kewell and Viduka and Tim Cahill.
Time moves on fast.
And they don't really have that sort of depth of squad at the moment. So the hopes for them don't appear to be particularly high. Tunisia expected to be more defensive in their approach as well. You would think, Denmark and France were in the same Nations League group this year, and Denmark were comfortably better than France. And they're good. We'll talk about dark horses later on. I mean, how dark are they? The sense of like the form is in the book for them. they got to the to the semi-final of the Euros with an incredible backstory, and they were running on empty at the end of it, and they've carried that form into subsequent campaigns. So they're probably in a better place than France. They just obviously don't have a better squad.
No.
And France have no Kante, they've no Pogba. Would Pogba have been too much of a distraction this time, or would he have just gone back and played brilliantly for France again? Who knows? But they still have a sort of a depth of attacking talent, and they still have Mbappe, who, I mean, we could still be sitting here or chatting here in a month's time saying this was obvious. This was staring us in the face all along. That he can be the outstanding talent in the world, aside from Haaland, who's not here. If he clicks. So I think France, okay, Varane, like big players, is he okay? And through the spine of the side, who's going to play in midfield? That's a question mark. Will it be Rabiot or Camavinga? Like, what way will they go in there?
Fofana of Monaco is another player that is talked about. So it's that Guendouzi, obviously, who's Prism of the Premier League, Guendouzi ex-Arsenal, but he's progressed a lot since the Arsenal days. They have a strength. They're just one of these countries that you don't tend to have a weak player in there. They're all very good and some are exceptional. It's just a case where, Deschamps was there a long time. Can he get another kick out of them? Can he, they've won it already. It's a GA phrase you hear a lot, but the hunger to go and do it again, especially with some of those players, the likes of Griezmann and Giroud, some of the older players, they'll have to be driven by the younger players, the Salibas and players like that who will have that determination to refresh. France and Denmark to go through then?
I think so, yeah. I mean, you think about France, they won the last World Cup. In the last Euros, they were coasting against Switzerland, really, and they got done, So, but I think Denmark and France to advance. But obviously the order in which they go through could have big relevance for how the competition opens up for them.
Okay. We'll take a break there, Dan, and after the break we'll go through the rest of the groups and get some predictions as well. Welcome back to the Indo World Cup. Still joined in the studio by Daniel McDonnell. We have talked about groups that are kind of divided almost between too strong and too weak, and I think that's probably most pronounced in Groups E and F, where Group B we've got Spain, Germany, Costa Rica and Japan, and Group F we have Belgium, Croatia, Canada and Morocco. Can you see any shocks across that?
No, I feel a bit sorry for Japan because they actually have an okay squad. And I think we've seen with the influence at Celtic and sort of various players that are popping up across Europe that I think Japanese football is producing some good talents, but they've ended up in an absolute nightmare of a group. I mean, it's just the way things worked out with the draw. And while the extent to which Spain and Germany are work in progress can be debated, I think Spain in particular, although they still actually acquit themselves very well when it came to the crunch in the Euros, and Germany have got their own Euros in 2 years' time. I think they will go through. As I said, I feel for Japan. I think if Japan were in one of the other groups, you'd be sort of, if they were in the group with sort of Qatar and Senegal or whatever, you'd sort of be thinking,
or England's group,
you give them a chance. It's hard to give them a chance. But if there's one mad shock in the competition, it might be Japan doing something in one of those games.
And do you think it'd be Germany who would be the one?
Potentially, yeah. I think so. Yeah, Germany are still, Hansi Flick is there now and they're trying to sort of play in a progressive way, but they went out of the last World Cup pretty limply. I know it's form guides have gone back 4 years and time can be dangerous. There's always a bit of that with international football, but I think for them to go through Group F, I think Croatia are still going to be they're bringing in some younger players, not just reliant on sort of Modric and the older guard to carry them. Belgium, probably the same comments with Belgium every time. Everyone thinks they're going to have a chance. Do people inherently trust them to get the job done in the latter stages? Maybe not, but I think they trust them to get through the groups. They're in with Morocco and Canada. I think Canada actually could be a good story, but the problem that they have is that they have like Alphonso Davies, who's a exceptional player, but he's inhibited by a problem, and that's a concern.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there was some stat around Belgium of, I think it was it 11 of their players had played more than 60% of all of Martinez's games. In theory they should have continuity, but again, you're looking at them to get out of the group. You would fancy them to get out of the group, certainly, but I think for the players they have, they're probably expecting a little bit more this time around, and they're on a difficult side of the draw as well, so it's going to be hard to see them go all the way. Again, the intensity, the mid-season of that Just the format.
Yeah, they have a big
gonna
performance in them. I think in every
yeah.
tournament they have a big performance in them. And I actually felt a little bit sorry for some of the grief they got in 2018, because I was at the semi-final against France and they actually played okay in that game. But again, at that time would have been Hazard and De Bruyne, and there was the question of was De Bruyne delivering. Obviously they're excellent against Brazil, but I mean Hazard, obviously his career has gone in a particular direction. So there's just it's a core, it's their golden generation, but they're sort of coming towards the end.
Yeah, they're starting to tarnish a little bit. I think then Group G now is one that you can certainly, group of death. There's always talk of a group of death. With Brazil, Serbia, Switzerland, and Cameroon. I mean, you parachute any of those 4 teams into any other group, and you'd be saying they'd have a chance.
There's mixed vibes in Cameroon, I think, but certainly in terms of like the Serbia-Switzerland one, I think is tough. Really tough. Like, I don't know how you feel about, because I think the funny thing about like the nature of international football, right? Like, is that we've got Portugal and Serbia in this competition, and you feel like you know them pretty well because you've watched them play Ireland. And I think a lot of people will talk about Portugal in a minute. A lot of people externally will see Portugal on paper and go, Portugal, we expect them to go far. From my perspective, having watched them play Ireland twice, and they finished behind Serbia in the group, I wouldn't be having Portugal at all.
I tend to agree with you on that. I mean, I think at least like Stephen Kenny was very impressed with Serbia whenever he was when he was speaking about the teams in the group. Even we did pretty well against them. They have a quality about them. I think they'll retain possession very well, which will be helpful in the kind of in the heat of Qatar. Switzerland maybe not. Switzerland not quite in the modern high press type of way. They don't tend to. I think they play a little bit more traditionally. But like, I think from Brazil's perspective, all of those games are going to be hard. They're going to be Serbia, Switzerland, Cameroon. They're going to be tough games. You look at the other favourites. France can probably, obviously the game against Tunisia and will be tough from it's not quite a local derby, but there's relationship, should we say, there across. So they're going to have a couple of hard games there. England should be okay against Iran. I think Brazil are going to have to be right on it right from the start, and whether they can keep that going for the 3.5 weeks of the tournament, because when you look at it, then if Brazil go to top the group as expected, then you're probably looking at Uruguay or Portugal in the last 16, which is, if there was such a thing as a European South American derby, it would be Portugal and Brazil, or else it'll be Brazil and Uruguay, which is a South American derby. And again, that's 4 games, and that's before you even get to a quarter-final stage.
Yeah, I suppose the other way to look at that, though, is that Brazil, and I mentioned it earlier, like Brazil haven't been able to play European teams at all. They've been trying to arrange friendlies with them and have been able to do it, and you feel like they have a degree of dominance in their own patch. So if they ended up playing Uruguay or something, they'd probably have some kind of mental edge over them. I see what you're saying, but I think there's just a real depth to the Brazilian squad that it could have the opposite effect, like that the group could really answer some questions they have. Because it seems like the debate in Brazil at the moment is they have all this sort of attacking talent, but how attacking are they going to be? Like, obviously you're going to have, it seems like Richarlison is going to be their central striker.
So,
they've got Neymar, they've got Vinicius, and it's a question of how many more can they fit in. Like, Casemiro is going to be sort of minding the house, but there's a question of what do they do in some of the other those sort of midfield, intermediate sort of positions between midfield and attack. And maybe games against decent level opposition like Serbia and Switzerland, but not the best level you can face, but maybe better than what they faced in some of their sort of qualifying games, might just get them up the pitch. So you can flip that in a different direction. Like, I see the point, and there's obviously defensively, what way are they going to go? Like, there's still a fondness for sort of Thiago Silva there, and
38, I think.
Yeah, like Dani Alves is in the squad. Will it be Danilo? But maybe the group might just allow them to establish the hierarchy within their squad and ready them for the knockout stages. That's another way of looking at it.
Yeah.
Sometimes you see teams that are fantastic in the groups and then they get caught cold in the round of 16 because they haven't really had a proper game yet. Whereas I feel like those teams will give them a proper game. Yeah,
no, they'll certainly have a match sharpness to them. If whatever position they come out of the group, we've got the final group now: Uruguay, Portugal, Ghana, South Korea. Obviously, Portugal, Cristiano Ronaldo,
low key,
no, low maintenance. certainly at United, he appears to have gone in terms of, you know, his usefulness versus the trouble he causes has gone to the wrong ratio. From a United perspective, there was obviously that video with Bruno Fernandes and him in the Portugal dressing room there, which looked a bit of a, you're never sure with these things as to, you know, the moment.
It'll be overanalyzed.
There was something in it, but like professional footballers, if you know anything about professional footballers, they're driven and selfish, and it won't bother Bruno Fernandes in the slightest what he thought about what Cristiano did to Manchester United if he can deliver for Portugal. Do you see him delivering for Portugal?
I mean, like, you think about it, right? I mean, Ireland played Portugal, when was that now? That was September 2021 in Faro. Ronaldo was a big obstacle to how Portugal played during the game, in the sense that I think for Ireland, their game plan, it helped that Ronaldo was coming drifting out of his station, and it meant that a lot of the game was ahead of Ireland, and they could manage it, and it was great. And they lost 2-1 to 2 Ronaldo headers.
Yes, that was
so like, there you go. And the question you have with Portugal is that you look at the good players that they have in the squad. Obviously, you know, Jota's injured, but you know, between Bernardo Silva,
I think is a fabulous player,
top and really intelligent player, and Bruno Fernandes. But it's quite clear that Ronaldo has a central role in that side. But it's a bit like the Manchester United thing. It's like, will he do great things himself? Yes. But is he potentially still an obstacle to the team hitting the ceiling of what it could achieve with the sum of the parts? That's the concern. And again, like, tricky enough group this, you know, and
Ghana,
even
South Korea, they will be.
Even the run of games, like, do you need to, you know, how do you use him? Do you sort of protect him a bit, you know? And you have a situation as well where the manager is stuck around as well too. You know, Fernando Santos has been around forever, and there seems to be a sense that I think Ronaldo's been booed by Portugal fans in recent memory. The manager seems to be unpopular, so because he's overstayed his welcome. I think they've got a little bit of burnout potential, I have to say. And Uruguay seem like a side that, while they still have Suarez and Cavani and Diego got in, and the lads are still going, they have a little bit of a new generation. They got Valverde as one of the best players in Europe in midfield, Nunes. And they got Darwin Nunes. So I think Uruguay could win this group. Ghana, they're always very entertaining at these tournaments, with Chris Hughton is involved as technical advisor. Anything can happen with Ghana in this tournament. They're generally a story.
Of course, Ghana and Uruguay have history as well.
They do, 2010. So they're unpredictable. And then what have we got? South Korea.
South Korea,
who, I mean, it's, you know, it's Son's situation obviously is a
like
slight
Mane,
worry there.
Little bit like Mane.
Their
hopes are basically pinned.
Seems
around.
simplistic, but there's something in it. Like, he definitely is a galvanising figure. Portugal might scrape through, but I don't know if they'll go any further. I think Uruguay to top the group there.
Yeah, okay. Well, that's one prediction for Group H. We're going to move on to predictions for the rest of the tournament now before we wrap up. We'll start with the obvious one. We start with the winners. Who do you think, Dan?
Well, I've sort of answered it there. I still rate Brazil to do it, and I accept the points about their route, and I accept that sometimes with analysis there's a danger to just, again, in international football, just hit on sort of these points that you should make. Well, you know, the climate will be a factor, and you know, the various sort of elements you can find, but sometimes these things are true. You know, like, this is why it took so long for, like, you know, European team to win in South America. You know, there's you know, like Brazil, they've probably built towards this. Like, you know, they have the same manager for about 5-6 years. There's a degree of stability. They have a deep squad. They have the ability probably to play in different ways. I think they are probably the strongest side in the competition. I think the European field is deep, you know, and there's a lot of different rivals. I'm not sure if there's an established hierarchy there. I don't know what you think.
Yeah, I think, like, again, if you're having this conversation in an hour, I could probably give a different answer, because when you start to sit down and you start to plot who's playing where, you know, you realise, oh, actually they're going to play against each other, you know, and it all comes down to France was the team that I, you know, looked at. We spoke about it earlier on, where, you know, Mbappe, you know, you see something obvious in front of you. You know, I think from that side of the draw as well, I think is going to play a factor. I think England, have a big chance as well.
Because of the draw.
I think in a lot of ways because of the draw. You know, Brazil are going to, as you said earlier on, are going to have to come through, in my opinion, a tough group. Uruguay or potentially a Portugal, and then you're looking at Spain, Belgium, you know, Germany, Croatia. It's a very, very difficult route to the final. Now, obviously, that'll, you know, the last time around England had a relatively, I've heard people say, but almost dismissing England as because of the draw they've had in the last couple. You got to beat what's in front of you, and I don't think people, when you get to winning a World Cup, I don't think people tend to remember what your last 16 draw was, what your quarter-final draw was. But I think it's certainly a help to have an easy game or two thrown in there. In terms of dark horses, then, we've gone through obviously all the teams there. It's Serbia or Switzerland for me. It's just whoever comes out of the
who do you think actually comes out on top of that one, though?
I think probably Serbia. And again, we talked about the Premier League prism earlier on. There's the Ireland prism there as well, where you're clouded a little bit, but you've seen probably more of Serbia than you have of Switzerland. I think Mitrovic, his record is phenomenal. I think he's been saving himself a little bit for the last few weeks.
That's the thing about Serbia. They have such a good squad, but he carried them through still.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think a goal scorer, it's sort of traditional way. I think a goal scorer can carry you a long, long way in this tournament. And if they get through the group, Uruguay or Portugal, probably in the last 16 for Serbia, and then after that, who knows who you go. Dark horses for yourself? Yeah,
I mean, our Denmark dark horses, as I said, they've been such an established, they've become such an established sort of European top level side that I'm not sure if they are. I just think there's a possibility they could win that group, and it might just that potentially open things up. What they'd be playing the runners up in Group C, then wouldn't it be in the?
Yeah, you're looking at probably Argentina or Mexico.
Yeah, I think like if Argentina win that group, like Denmark probably need to win the group to be real dark horses. I'm not saying they do a job in Argentina, but I just think they've got a chance of winning the group. I think France could like Mbappe in 2018 took him a while to warm into the tournament. So if Denmark can do that, I'd give them a real chance. The obvious one is to look. I know for people looking and talking about dark horses, I think that Group H, Group G sort of scenario does open up the potential. But again, I'm not sure if Uruguay really count as dark horses, but I think they've got a chance of going pretty far.
And just finally, for a bit of a pin stickers guide, the top goal scorer, Golden Boot. There's been some great players, obviously, the likes of Ronaldo, just Fontaine, players like that have won Golden Boot, and there's been like Selenko thrown in there as well.
Yeah,
there's always a possibility of someone, Memphis Depay scoring 5 against Qatar or something like that. That could muddy the waters a little bit. But is there a player in particular that you'd pick out to try and to be top scorer?
No, I mean, so I'm sort of disagreeing with myself. I mean, I'm talking about Mbappe starting slow, and yet I feel like France have some games in that group where he could actually run up a number potentially. But honestly, sometimes you look at the Golden Boot stuff. I mean, like Harry Kane, it'll probably England, a couple of penalties. They're decent on set pieces.
Can be a bit of a flat track bully as well.
How many goals does it take? Like it may well be that someone like Harry Kane is the answer. I think I actually have tried to look at this, and you always try and find some sort of left field angle, and I've struggled. I think it's probably the ones we're talking about here, barring some sort of freakish event in one game, are going to be the ones towards the top end.
Yeah, well, we'll see how those predictions play out. We may play them back in a month's time whenever we're done.
What's your prediction?
I was going to go with Harry Kane as well.
You're going with Kane as well?
I was going with Kane as well for the flat track bully element that he has, and might get a few against Wales, and I think the last 16, I think they'll get through. I think they'll probably be strong enough. Whoever they run into the quarter final might be a different story, but I think 5 games for Kane might be enough for him to run up a number. So that'd be my take on it. We'll see how it all plays out over the course of the next month, and maybe play back these predictions and see how accurate we were. Dan, thanks for joining me today. We'll be back tomorrow, where we'll go through the first game, which is Qatar and Ecuador, and go into more detail on what we expect from the tournament on the ground itself. Thanks for joining me, Dan.
Thank you.